Today I'm joined by Darragh Magee of AEG to talk covering slurry and digestate stores. So as part of the Clean Air strategy, the UK deadline for covering stores is 2027. And there are a range of options available, including clay granules, which is a type of permeable cover. So Darragh's here today to help answer questions that farmers and anaerobic digestion site operators have about these clay granules. So firstly, Darragh, what are these clay granules made of?
Well, they're called LECA AeroTop. That's LECA, which stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. So put very simply, I have a piece of clay there. Okay, that started life as a tiny little speck of clay, and it was cooked at between 11 and 1200 degrees. And as you cook it, it expands. And as it expands, it honeycombs in the middle.
Right.
And that achieves two things. First of all, it, hang on, what we've got on the screen here. There you go. That achieves two things. First of all, it enables it to float because it's terribly, terribly light. And secondly, the honeycomb effect gives you a very large internal surface area. And no doubt in your questions, it'll come up what that internal surface area is used for. So it is simple clay. The clay is imported from either Denmark or Portugal, and that is purely and simply for geological reasons. The right type of clay, unfortunately, is not available within the UK. So we bring the clay in and we coat it with a hydrophobic coating to prevent it absorbing moisture and to prolong its active life.
Great, okay. So how do these LECA granules reduce ammonia emissions from lagoons and slurry stores?
Right, well, two ways. First of all, the very fact that you have got them floating on the surface of the slurry will stop the wind whip effect across the surface, the movement of air across the surface. So as air moves across the surface of slurry, it normally lifts the gases from the top sort of 2 to 3 inches. It's a bit like forming a vacuum, and then more gas comes in. So to be realistic, if you just opened up cardboard boxes and laid it on top, you would probably reduce the emissions by about 60% anyway.
Okay.
Wouldn't last very long.
Yeah.
But you know, it creates that physical barrier.
Yeah.
The other method that affects the controlling of emission is commisorption. Now this is ions in this particular clay, and that's why we import it. It has a reaction with the ammonia and with hydrogen sulfide, and it basically breaks down the ammonia in the clay, and then that large internal surface area comes into play, because that becomes the equivalent of a storage tank, basically. So this will end up at the end of its life containing quite a lot of nitrogen and sulfur. And when you come to dispose of it, you can put it onto stubble ground, not grassland, because of the hydrophobic coating. If you put it on grassland, it just lie on the surface. But you can put it on stubble ground because it's pure clay and plow it in, and you will be adding a quantity of both nitrogen and sulfur to the ground when you're doing that. Well, interestingly enough, there was some work done a good few years back now, and it did show reducing CO2 emissions, but nowhere near as efficiently as it reduced ammonia and hydrogen sulfide.
Yes, and that's exactly what it's designed for.
Yeah, I mean, it reduces ammonia by about 85%, and it was reducing CO2 by under 40%.
Okay.
But it's a contribution.
Great. Okay, so the next question a lot of people ask me, so you've got these granules, so how do you actually spread them onto the surface of the lagoon or the store?
Well, in most situations, we blow them on with a blower wagon that's just exactly the same as a feed blower that most farmers would be used to knowing, except the blower that we use is larger. If you used an ordinary feed blower, you would damage the aggregates. So we literally back up to a lagoon, and we normally can blow down anything from 30 to 40 meters down pipes, and we just blow it on at one end. It floats, and it will spread out over the surface and level itself out. So it's a very easy material to actually install. For small quantities, it's available in 2.2 tote bags, where you can, for example, just lift it up over the top of the tank. There's a drawstring at the bottom of the tote bag. You pull the drawstring, it just drops out. And a good number of our customers actually just get it delivered in bulk, and they install it themselves with a telehandler and a grain bucket. Just put it on.
Yeah, so it's quite quick. So I guess you don't need to plan in advance. So I guess with the floating covers that we talked about earlier, with those you have to plan it and design it, whereas I guess these LECA granules are very quick to install. You guess you only need to work out the quantity required.
You just need to work out the quantity required. The quantity required is really quite simple. 1 cubic meter of LECA AeroTop will cover 10 square meters of surface area at the required depth of 100 millimeters, and it's got to go on at 100 millimeters to meet the BAT requirements. That's best available technology, and LECA has been accepted as BAT in Europe for close on 20 years now. Great.
Okay. So the next question is, how would you get the slurry and the digestate in and out of the store once you've got the LECA granules in place?
Okay, well, putting it in makes absolutely no difference at all. You can put it in as you have always put it in, whether it's scraping it down a ramp or whether it's putting it down pipe work. The only thing I would say is that if you are pumping it into your lagoon, or into a tank for that matter, that the inlet pipe needs to go below the surface of the slurry or digestate. Yeah. And that is for two reasons. One, that it minimizes the ripple effect on the surface, and that ripple effect will move the air cover away as you're filling, but when you stop filling, it will float back again. Okay. But perhaps even more important, whether you've got the LECA on or not, you should always have your inlet pipe below the surface, because it will stop the aerosol effect. When you're lots and lots of times you see slurry just being blasted into a lagoon, and the loss of ammonia doing that through the aerosol effect is very large. And your nose should tell you that, because you can smell it. Yes. And all that is lost nitrogen at the end of the day. So all you're doing is just throwing nitrogen into the atmosphere instead of being able to utilize it as a fertilizer. So pumping in is no problem. Right. And emptying is in reality no problem, but you can't actually empty a lagoon or a tank all the way to the bottom when you have got LECA AeroTop on it. Otherwise you will suck it out. So in most situations you need to stop somewhere between about 12 and 18 inches above your outlet, okay, just before it starts to vortex. Yeah. In some situations, in lagoons as opposed to tanks, basically, We have a bit of kit called the turtle. So if you can imagine a turtle shell, right? So basically, it's a metal plate on 4 legs, and the outlet pipe gets attached to a pipe that runs below the plate.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay? And the plate has got a skirt around the outside of it, so that the slurry is only being drawn in below that skirt. So it enables you to get as empty a lagoon as you possibly can, and that can work quite well.
Yeah, that's a good approach. And I've also had questions with stirring, but obviously with the granules, if you're stirring, are there any issues there at all?
No, one of the really big practical advantages of the LECA is that you can mix without any problem at all. If you're using a PTO-driven shaft, you literally just drop it in through the LECA. LECA closes around the top of the shaft, and away you go. And as the current develops in your lagoon or tank, you will just see the LECA moving with the current on the surface. So one of its big advantages is that mixing is really not an issue. It's very, very easy.
Right.
A lot easier probably than with a conventional floatants.
Yes, okay. Darragh, one of the questions that we get asked is, how long do these LECA granules actually last?
Well, they have now been installed on lagoons for the best part of 15 years to date. The reality is that sooner or later they will become saturated, because we talked about them being sort of the equivalent of a small storage tank, if you wish.
Yes.
And they will become saturated, and then their efficiency will diminish. But they've been on for 15 years so far, and are still operating. On the oldest installation that we have, I think they have had 2 small top-ups over that period of time. Not necessarily because they have reduced in their efficiency, but that they have drawn out small quantities when they have been sprayed. So, you know, but you can, I mean, as they get older in life, you can always top them up and keep it efficient that way.
Okay, so that was all of the questions that I had from farmers and anaerobic digestion operators about these LECA granules. So thank you, Darragh. That was a really helpful insight. So check out my other videos on slurry store and digestate store covers, and also other videos on ammonia emissions. Thank you very much.